Hey, you're listening to the Riverdale podcast. This is episode number 87. My name is Jonathan. Welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA. This is an Archie Comics fan podcast. We update every Saturday morning, and every week we break things down into 4 categories. The first category is the book of the week. That's the comic book I read this week. Sometimes it's a new comic book, sometimes it's an old comic book, but it's always an Archie comic book. We move then to the news of the week. That's what happened in the world of Archie in the week since our last podcast. We move then to new releases. That's what came out this past week, what will be coming up this coming week from Archie Comics. And we're going to wrap things up today looking ahead at an upcoming collected edition from Archie Comics. This was a cool, big, exciting week for Archie releases, a couple of amazing books. So let's get into the book of the week. You guys, I've never had this much trouble deciding on the book of the week, ever. Oftentimes that's because we only get one book from Archie that week. Sometimes that's because there are no books from Archie, and so I go back and read a back issue and talk about a back issue. And sometimes there's a clear, exciting issue that came out beyond the other things. Sometimes the 32 pagers are more exciting for me than the double digest, and sometimes the other way around. In any event, this week, I tried desperately to decide whether to talk about The Fox #1 or Archie 649, both of which were tremendous and exciting, and ultimately I decided to go with the one that I thought was more important, perhaps historically. Time will tell, but in any event, this week's book of the week is The Fox #1. Now, let's jump way back to last May, I believe, the first or second week of May, when this was announced. And it was announced under awkward circumstances, and we were expecting the first issue of the New Crusaders Dark Tomorrow, which was to be the second miniseries after that initial Rise of the Heroes arc. And the week before it was set to be published, we got the announcement that it had been pushed off until next year. And that was a tough pill to swallow. But very adeptly, Archie also announced that day that they would be doing this book that we're talking about today, The Fox. This is a classic 1940s MLJ character who has been updated throughout the years. And this time around, as they announced back in May, it was going to be Dean Haspiel and Mark Waid working on this book. And I couldn't have been more thrilled. Like, as I said, bummed out that the New Crusaders series got pushed off, but really, really thrilled about this book. It was a good news, bad news kind of day for us folks following Archie Comics. So here we are, all these months later, with the very first issue of The Fox. And as I talked about with Afterlife with Archie just a few weeks back, this was a lot of expectation, a lot of excitement leading up to this. And I really felt like this book delivered on its potential, delivered on its promise, and was a super exciting read. It's hard to say what I liked about it, because what I liked about it was how casual and understated and simple the whole thing was. Like a lot of great art, it accomplishes a lot really effortlessly. And we're introduced in this issue to the Fox, who is by day a newspaper reporter and photographer. We're given this understanding of him as this sort of Luddite who is still using a film camera and things like that. We're taught a lot about him with some very simple, like neatly placed facts. We meet his wife, and we follow him on his first day on the job, having just moved back to Impact City. Impact City, one of the locations within the Red Circle universe. So this is going to be tied into the larger continuity of the New Crusaders and all of that stuff. But I guess I'm not going to get into the plot as much. You should definitely pick it up and read it, get it digitally, get it at your comic shop. But I wrote down a few things as I read it. And first of all, there's sort of like 4 basic things about this that gave me a really intense sense of classic superhero comics. And I just wrote down a few bullet points. I guess we'll just sort of go through them. First of all is that there is straight up cartooning. There is a scene in which the Fox is being sort of beguiled by this female character. And Haspel's not afraid to just put some hearts around his head. Classic, almost Looney Tunes style. Just, big Charles Schultz, Charlie Brown hearts around his head. Or if the Fox gets struck, he's not afraid to put stars around his head. Simple stuff like that you don't see in modern superhero comics. Just those simple, almost comic strippy sort of devices that portray things super simply. I love that. Exposition in dialogue. You learn a lot about the Fox in his conversations, and they're not afraid to have those sort of quips back and forth. They're not afraid to have a conversation that wouldn't happen in real life. You wouldn't necessarily tell the person you're fighting what you're doing or where you're coming from or things like that. There's something really classically superhero comic about the way that they go about telling you about the characters. You do have an internal monologue that's running throughout, but you also get a lot of information just from people talking back and forth. And banter is the third bullet point. Really like classic Spider-Man style banter between the Fox and his various foes in this issue. He fights a number of people in here. Just good stuff. Again, stuff that you're not going to see a lot of in modern comics, stuff that does not exist outside of comic books. Even in movies, you can't have 2 people fighting and carrying on this quippy back and forth conversation. I absolutely love that. And the fourth thing I wrote down was just the simple costume, the simple human form. I believe it was Men of Tomorrow, the book about the history of the comic industry, in which they talked about, I believe it was that book, in which they talked about the appeal of drawing superhero comics in the early days, during the birth of superhero comics. One of the appealing things and one of the simple things that they did was to draw basically just the nude form and put the character in a tight-fitting costume. So you weren't drawing a lot of extraneous detail. You could draw it quickly. That's where you get a costume like Superman's original costume, like Batman's original costume, like a lot of those original heroes. A simple, tight-fitting suit, so that you weren't concerned with the folds of the clothing, you weren't concerned with intricacies of a mask and things like that. There's something very brilliant and very classic about a classic old school superhero costume, and that's something the Fox has down pat. There's a beautiful 2-page spread where we first see the Fox in costume, and it's exciting. It is a little bit like Mike Allred's Madman. There's really an electricity to it. And I guess I keep saying classic because that's what it is. It is a classic story without being a throwback story. It doesn't feel dated, but it does feel in a certain way vintage, for lack of a better term. But I really, really loved it. I think if this is successful, and it seems to be successful, the first issue has sold out. Hopefully we're going back for a second printing. That would be rad. Hopefully people are going crazy for this, and hopefully this is an indication of what's to come. I think this is currently scheduled to be a 5-issue miniseries. I would be totally content with this being 5 tight, packed, contained issues. And then maybe Dean moves on to a different character. Maybe they get, Archie gets some other high-profile folks to work on a different Mighty Crusader character. There's so much to be done here, and there's so much accomplished in this first issue, and then so much potential for what could be coming up. So I'm really, really thrilled about this week's Book of the Week, The Fox #1 from Red Circle Comics, Archie Comics. Not much more I can say, guys. You gotta read it to believe it. In Archie news this week, a great interview with Dean Haspiel. I feel like every week we're talking about more interviews with Dean Haspiel discussing The Fox. A lot of press coming out about that. But a great long-form conversation with John Suntress over at the Word Balloon podcast, wordballoon.com. If you're not familiar with the show, you should be familiar with the show. John Suntress is sort of the preeminent podcast interviewer when it comes to comics folks, and he had a good long conversation with Dean Haspiel this week. I listened to the majority of that, and then I got a message from Joe over on the Facebook page. I'm forgetting your last name, Joe. I apologize. Letting me know about that. So thanks for that. Also, this week, over on Comics Alliance, Chris Sims, always waving the Archie Comics flag, wrote about Archie 649, and specifically about the this week's Archie 649, the newest issue, the one I was juggling with for the pick of the week, and discussed the reappearance of Sassy Thrasher. Sassy Thrasher was the love interest of Jughead in that late 80s reboot, that renumbering #1, where they brought Jughead in as initially they brought him in as someone who has love interests, and then later on, I believe the teens or the 20s issues, they made him a skateboarder. They got rid of his crown, and they gave him this love interest in Sassy Thrasher, and she shows up in Archie 649. So Chris Sims wrote a bit about that over on Comics Alliance. And really, guys, if you haven't read Archie 649, if you're a little beaten down by all of these Archie comic stories that exist outside of Riverdale, and recasting the characters in different kind of storylines, things like that. That's what this appears to be, and it is definitely not. It's a story that's very, very much rooted in Riverdale. I was really, really pleasantly surprised. Not to mention, you get an appearance from Jelly Bean, and anytime we see Jelly Bean, I am an excited dude. So, those are your news stories for this week. Dean Haspiel is on Word Balloon. Chris Sims is writing about Archie 649 over on Comics Alliance. Head over to riverdalepodcast.com, and in the post for this episode, you'll find links to both of those stories. All right, new releases for this past Wednesday, October the 30th. We're Archie 649, as we just discussed, for $2.99. Also, The Fox #1, as I've already said, our book of the week, The Fox #1, out this week for $2.99. Also, this past Wednesday, we got Sonic the Hedgehog #254 for $2.99. And the Archie Comics Spectacular, It's a Date. It's a smaller trade paperback, smaller in trim size and page count for $5.99. Coming up this coming Wednesday, November the 6th, we're going to get Afterlife with Archie, the second printing of #1. Second issue is going to be out a few weeks after that, I believe. The 20th, we're going to get the second issue. This is the second printing of the first issue. This has got a cool new Francesco Francavilla cover on it. Looks great. $2.99 on that one. Also coming up next week, November the 6th, we're going to get Archie Double Digest #245 for $3.99, and Betty and Veronica Double Digest #217 for $3.99. I believe both of those are Christmas Double Digest. The Christmas books are rolling out. I'm thrilled about this. Apologies to any Double Digest fans who are not into Christmas, because, man, I believe all of them coming out for the next month or month and a half are all Christmas-themed stuff, which I'm super psyched about. On the digital side of things, last week we had a couple cool digital books that completely passed me by. I want to touch on these so you don't miss them as well. Last week we got That Wilkin Boy. Last week, digital exclusive, That Wilkin Boy, 150-page digital exclusive for $4.99. Also last week, which I completely missed, was Dilton #3 for $2.99. That's that continuing digital exclusive series. Those are traditional 20 to 22-page stories, just like your regular 32-page comics, but in digital form. And that's Dilton #3 for $2.99. This week, super excited about this. We got Ginger, Sweetheart of a Nation. That is a 50-page digital exclusive for $2.99. Ginger is a classic 40s and 50s Archie Comics character. One of the many other characters outside of the realm of Riverdale, not unlike Wilbur and those kind of characters, which maybe borrowed a lot from the Riverdale gang, but were a completely different sort of universe, for lack of a better term. But Ginger, this week, digital exclusive, a 50-pager for $2.99. So those are your new releases for this past Wednesday, the 30th, this coming Wednesday, the 6th, and your digital releases for this week and last week from Archie Comics. Finally today, I wanted to point out something that has sort of completely caught me by surprise. Well, maybe not surprised, but exciting nonetheless. Coming up at the end of this month, November 27th, we'll see the release of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Magic Within, Volume 4. Now, we talked to Tanya Del Rio last March, I believe, about the first of these digest-sized manga volumes of her work on the Sabrina the Teenage Witch character. And when that book first came out, the first of this series, I looked at the numbers and realized that, with the publishing schedule as it was, and the number of issues that she worked on, it looked like her entire run was going to be republished by the end of the year. And it looks like that is, in fact, the case. This volume, Volume 4, coming out on the 27th for $10.99, collects issues 90 through 100 of her run of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Now, what isn't accounted for after that is issues 101 through 104, which were a separate story about Salem, her cat, who at this point in time, sort of a prequel, I assume, is a human being. Stories of him before he was sort of banished and became a cat. I don't know what's going to happen to those stories. The Sabrina stories, as I understand it, ended with issue 100. And we had that 4-issue miniseries of Young Salem after that. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure, I would assume that we would get or have already gotten those issues digitally. But it looks like they're not going to be collected into this this series of manga-sized volumes, which is a little bit of a drag. But again, I haven't read the full story. I don't know how important those are to the story that has come before it. But nonetheless, it's great after all these years to have all of Tanya Del Rio's Sabrina stuff in 4 volumes. I mean, it is a drag. We don't have them in color. We've got them in the black and white and grayscale stuff. But nonetheless, compared to what we've had the prior 5 years since the series ended, super exciting to have all of that stuff together. And as of November 27th, with the release of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Magic Within Volume 4, we will have all that stuff in 4 little volumes. So how cool is that? There are a lot of great ways to help out the show. Heading over to iTunes and writing an iTunes review for the show is super helpful. Downloading the show every week and listening to it, that's super helpful. Writing an email to be part of the show, add a little content to the show, ask a question. It's a great way to help out the show. Another great way is to head over to audibletrial.com/Riverdale. Sign up there through your Amazon account and download a free book and sign up for a free trial of audible.com. This is the biggest online resource for audiobooks and audio entertainment of all different kinds. So head over to audibletrial.com/Riverdale or head over to riverdalepodcast.com and click the link there and sign up for a free trial and get a free audiobook of your choice. On the way out today, I want to remind everyone to head over to riverdalepodcast.com. There you're going to find the cover of this week's Book of the Week, The Fox #1. You'll also find links there to like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter. Just updated. I've been woefully behind on keeping up with the YouTube stuff, but all of the current episodes are up on YouTube, streaming. You can listen there. Send an email to the show at riverdalepodcast@yahoo.com. Send in any questions, comments, constructive or destructive feedback on the show. You can listen to the show on iTunes. You can head to the iTunes store, search for Riverdale Podcast, and have new episodes delivered to you every week. If you're listening on iTunes, a great way to help out the show is to write an iTunes review. It really helps make the show more visible when folks are searching for it. The Riverdale Podcast is part of First Comics News. Head over to firstcomicsnews.com for updated news, podcasts, great stuff. A lot of things going on at firstcomicsnews.com. I guess that's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Again, my name is Jonathan, and I'll see you again next week here in lovely Riverdale, USA.